Far, far away from the Strait of Hormuz, something really interesting is happening. Countries are changing their energy strategy almost overnight. Decisions that might have once taken years are being made in weeks.
So we're seeing some really interesting dynamics playing out in Asia, in Europe, in North Africa, in a number of places around the world. In Asia, some are calling it the sort of Ukraine moment for Asia. The analogy being that in Europe, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we realized the extent to which European countries were reliant on Russian gas. And in a similar way, Asian countries have suddenly been realizing the extent to which they've been reliant on LNG, on liquefied natural gas imports.
That's Sam Geall, Associate Fellow at Chatham House and Senior Visiting Research Fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. And he's an expert on the geopolitics of energy with a focus on China, and says that country after country is not only pivoting to renewable energy, they are making a run for it.
And a number of countries have been making plans to switch very quickly. The Indonesian president called it a wake-up call for electrification, announced that motorcycles need to switch over to become electric, announced a major new solar pledge. In Vietnam, the largest conglomerate in the country, Vingroup, announced that it is cancelling the country's largest LNG-fired power plant project and replacing it with a renewables project. In the Philippines, in South Korea, they've announced big solar pledges. In Egypt, there's a major new solar project planned. And all of this really just in the past couple of months in response to an obvious need to make our economies resilient. So there's clearly a kind of strong energy security argument, which is about the volatility and variability and entanglements associated with imported fossil fuels. And for the first time, really, it's the same argument as the one that has typically been associated with the climate change argument, which is to say it's a renewable energy argument, or at least it's driving a case for non-fossil fuel sources of energy, including, of course, nuclear as well. In Japan, there's a major conversation also about the need potentially to restart nuclear energy plants as a source of resilient energy. The Prime Minister there has called for Japan to become 100% energy self-sufficient, and for them, nuclear is a big part of that too.
The notable thing is that this no longer seems to be a partisan matter. Remember how political parties would battle over the merits of switching to renewables, the costs, the subsidies, and how fast? Now, with this global energy shock, those ideological battle lines have kind of been set aside as countries around the world realize they don't have good energy security.
So, we're arguably living through, I guess, the third sort of energy shock in some 4 years after COVID and then Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But this one has hit much harder and faster, and actually it's reintroduced sort of an argument around the need for renewables, non-fossil fuel sources, as a way to reduce dependency on imported fossil fuels. So it's sort of cut the other way and arguably created a kind of new coalition of actors where people who might previously been skeptical about renewables are now realizing that there's a very strong energy security argument for them, which of course there's always been in some countries, particularly China, which has really seen electrification and renewables as a major part of their mission to mitigate fossil fuel reliance.
Now, China is very interesting. Beijing absolutely needs the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. And yet, as Sam pointed out there, it has also planned for this moment for 2 decades.
China's sometimes been described as a green energy superpower. Sometimes there's a description which I might prefer, which is an electrostate. It's a country that is becoming increasingly bound up with the electrification of the economy, as opposed to the import of molecular fuels.
You might call it green energy statecraft. Beijing bet on renewables even as it burned through coal and oil. Chinese policymakers decided renewable energy would be good for the economy and good for national security.
China relies on fossil fuels for its energy and its growth, and yet it's also probably the most resilient of the major economies. It's highly diversified and highly electrified at this point. They've really invested over the past 2 decades in building out a highly electric and diversified energy system. And a large part of that has always been about mitigating the volatility and the geopolitical entanglements associated with imported fossil fuels. Their concern particularly has been the choke point around the Strait of Malacca, as opposed to the Strait of Hormuz, and the fact that it's patrolled by the US Navy's 7th Fleet. But it's led to very concerted investment in clean energy in particular. And that's really underpinned sort of 20 years now of build out of a really impressive solar, wind, and other renewables, non-fossil energy sources system, leading now to sort of total dominance really of the clean energy supply chain. Some 90% of solar panels are manufactured in China. Similar commanding share of wind power, turbines, batteries, electric vehicles, critical mineral processing. Many of the components and elements of the supply chain that are important for the renewable energy transition are based really in long-term, quite patient innovation and industrial policy in China, which has really been about unleashing those technological forces, becoming the leading supplier of the new technologies needed for a carbon-constrained world, and have been really tied up with energy security arguments rather than just being about environmental concern, which has sort of been where, I guess, the association in Europe and the West has been. There's always been a very tight understanding that, or a tight relationship between energy security and climate action in China. And I think that argument is now starting to resonate in other economies.
Remember those countries mentioned earlier? Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Japan? Okay, so they've recognized that it's not great to be overly reliant on oil and gas, but switching to renewables will require buying a lot of renewable energy infrastructure. You know, the actual solar panels, the massive blades for wind farms from one major source, China.
Yeah, I think the bind is particularly difficult for so-called middle powers, countries in Europe, countries in Southeast Asia, who are looking, quite seriously to decarbonize their economies, and they're facing at least 3 challenges at once. One is how to decarbonize rapidly, something their publics want to see, something that they need to see in order to mitigate the sort of vulnerabilities and dangers associated with climate change. But they also want to keep costs down in an environment where inflation has also spiked, particularly as a result of the war. And they're concerned about security, they're concerned about dependencies. So how can you balance that so-called sort of trilemma? Is a really difficult ask. And in Europe, for example, people worry about, are we moving from one dependency to another? Are we moving away from dependency on Middle Eastern oil, much as we also had one on, at least in parts of Europe, on Russian gas, towards a dependency on Chinese supplied sort of components for a renewable energy system. And at the same time, of course, the US is a wild card. It also, to greater or lesser extent, is sort of forcing the hand of countries that are sort of caught in the middle in supply chains. So it's a really difficult bind for countries, and it means that geopolitics is completely bound up with those clean energy choices.
Countries face few good options, but Sam makes the point that at least with renewables, once you build out the infrastructure, which again will depend on buying from China, but once you do, in the medium and long term, you will be in better shape.
But I will say that there is a difference between fossil fuel energy imports and renewable energy systems, insofar as you can't actually blockade the sun, you can't blockade the wind. There's a difference in, once you build out these systems, they do provide greater resilience from the kind of entanglements and volatility associated with imported fossil fuels.
What's special about this moment is that we may be at an inflection point. Adopting renewables has been a constant policy fight, but this time, because of this war, the pivot away from oil and gas might be real. And if that's the case, there's no going back.
I think any energy shock actually helps to create the argument for the alternatives, and previous energy shocks have done the same. What's different about this one is not only that it's happened so fast and in such a sort of hard and unpredictable fashion, but also actually that the alternatives are really there. They're mature. Renewable energy systems are coming in at a cost that means they can be installed and at scale, and the technology exists, and there's of course willing suppliers and mature industries that can do so. So it kind of feels different as a result. And I think as a result, yes, there might be some immediate snapback as fossil fuel prices fall again, as they will. But then I think the costs of renewables will continue to fall, as they have consistently over the past decade or so. And we'll see the increasing adoption of electric vehicles, again, because the argument is sort of being won on its own terms. The technologies are coming in at a price point that works for consumers, that work for governments, and they also have the added security benefits of increasing the resilience of our economies in a context of greater tensions and a need to extricate ourselves from some of the dependencies associated with imported oil.
So what do you think? Are we seeing a real moment when the world finally fully goes for renewables? And how do you feel about China as the world's electrostate superpower? Let us know in the comments. That's all for now. DW News is giving you the latest and also sharing deep dives on here and across the rest of social media. I'm Melissa Chan. Until next time.